All right, so welcome everyone to one of the Goldmine Project's monthly webinar events. For those of you returning, we are very happy to see you again. And for those of you new to the GMP, we're excited that you're diving into investing in your future career. At the GMP, we focus on monthly highlight videos and discussions on tools for job search and mental health, resources to aid those groups and job opportunities, and industry information. And just to give a little bit of an introduction, my name is Rob Priest, and me along with Catherine will be hosting this event going forward. And like I said before, we are going to be recording these and posting it to YouTube for viewing. And that personal YouTube channel will be under the Goldmine Project. And please follow and subscribe to see any presentations you have missed this year. I know the event that I was just a part of, it was a really interesting dive into whether people actually look at cover letters. So there's some great information and some great content there. And I will be asking this now and intermediately in the middle of the presentation, just in case there are some people who trickle in. But if you are here, I will ask you to please mute your mic. And if not, I will be muting you myself. And we do encourage to see your faces, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will be facilitating them as the event goes on. And yeah, with that out of the way, I want to introduce our wonderful guest today. We have Martin Shelest, who is the People and Culture Manager at IKEA. We have Sean Baker, who is a senior recruiter with the McDonald's Search Group. And we will have another presentator, Guillermo Franco, who is a digital skills recruitment and resource management consultant, which he will be coming in within the next 5 or 10 minutes. And just before I kind of pass this off to Catherine, I want to say that in the spirit of reconciliation, we would like to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kenai, and Piikani, and the Tsuut'ina, I apologize if I butchered any of these, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nations, Region 3. And for all of us who make their homes in Calgary, we are living in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And with that, Catherine, please take it away.
Wonderful. Thanks, Robbie. And thanks to everyone who's joining us today. I do see some familiar faces here popping in, but again, as Robbie said, feel free to please turn on your videos. There's nothing worse than presenting to an audience of black screens. So it definitely helps with the engagement piece. So definitely turn those screens on. I'll be facilitating some questions here for our lovely speakers that we're all dying to know the answers to. But what we'll be doing at the very end is we'll be opening up questions to our audience as well. So if you do happen to think of any questions, definitely put them in the chat box as we'll be grabbing questions from that. And then of course, at the end, any questions that you may have. So keep those questions for the end. We'll definitely get to them and throw those in the chat box. So yeah, what I'll do here quick is, we went through a quick introduction about where Sean's from, where Martin's from, but maybe if each of you could maybe have a quick dialogue about what your backgrounds are, what brought you into the career that you're in today. Martin, we'll start with you.
Perfect. I'll jump in there. Yeah. So I've got a bit of an interesting journey. I've been in the stream of HR since graduating university. But ironically enough, I've jumped to a variety of different industries. So first starting off in telecommunications, and I worked for Bell MTS back in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I was there for, I think, just close to about 13 years all in. And then from there, I transitioned into the construction industry, still within this field of HR, but in construction, and that was at LaFarge, and I was there for just shy of 5 years. And now I've migrated into the retail stream of things. So yeah, interesting journey in the sense of the industries I've gone through, but always maintained that passion for human resources.
Wonderful. Great. And I see we also just had Guillermo join us here. Hi, Guillermo. We're just going through introductions. Do you want to take the moment just to introduce yourself to our attendees here today?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Hello, everyone. My name is Guillermo Franco. I am a an IT recruiter is I guess the best description that I have for myself. But my background comprises quite a bit more than that. I started my career in a technical capacity after having finished a computer technology degree, and then quickly after moved into the world of human resources. And at this point of my life, 20 years after, I consider myself someone who can a translator of sorts, between the technical space and the software development space, and the workforce and the workplace. I'm constantly on the lookout for talent, not just to recruit them, but also available to help them understand sometimes what it takes to break into this space. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Thanks for joining
Great to
us
meet you.
today. Happy to have you. All right. And last but not least, Sean.
Awesome. Thanks, Catherine, for the great intro. My name is Sean Baker. I'm a senior recruiter with McDonald's Search Group. Spent the first 13 plus years of my career working in supply chain, worked in transportation, warehousing, distribution, and grew up around manufacturing. And one day had an epiphany that I wanted to use my networking passion in a new way, and broke into recruiting in 2012. So for the last 10 years, I've been focused on recruiting supply chain operations, logistics roles for companies in all sectors. I've worked with trucking, food manufacturing, building products, you name it. It's a space that I've touched over the last years. And outside of my day job, I've been very heavily involved in networking with a number of different associations. I'm the former president of the Apex Calgary chapter. I served on the Apex National Board. I'm currently a director with Supply Chain Canada Alberta Institute, also the chair of the Program Advisory Committee at SAIT, and a member of the Program Advisory Committee for Supply Chain at Bow Valley College. So I do a lot of work beyond my day job, working with people that are recent grads or people trying to break into this sector, and do a bit of pro bono work, basically talking with people and assisting in their plans and their strategic direction on how they're going to go and build their careers in this sector. So it's an absolute pleasure to be part of this panel, and I look forward to having some great conversations today.
Yeah, we definitely will. And as you all can see, we have a very impressive panel here today. So we're really hoping that we can take it away here, get down to some of the interesting questions, the burning questions that we're all wanting to know about technology, the supply chain industry. I think we can all agree that, the last 18 months have been a very unique experience for everyone. We would actually usually be sitting here all in person 2 years ago, right? So it's definitely a different world where we're living in today. So what I'd like to do is kind of start off here by just asking each of you, what does the internal process look like at either of your organizations when it comes to actually recruiting and selecting a candidate? And I know that we've got a couple of you are strictly recruiters, but maybe even just tell us what your process looks like for that. And maybe we'll start with Sean.
Sure, thanks. It's a combination. It's dependent on the role, the location, and the complexity. In some cases, I might already have a network of people that I know that I go to, people that are either actively on the hunt because they're on the market looking, or people that are passively looking, but that have the skills and experience necessary for the role. So, my job is to proactively reach out to those people. It's not as common for me to use a post and pray methodology of putting a job posting up and hoping the right people apply. That said, I also often will get applicants to one job that maybe are a better fit for something else. So, when I'm seeing applicants, I'm keeping those resumes on file, and I'm talking to those people down the road about different things. But it's really on the hunt side. It's really a proactive methodology of trying to find the right people that really fit the credentials that my client has given me.
For sure. And And I guess kind of just to dive into that a little bit more, my question for you is, on are you primarily using LinkedIn when you're directly reaching out to folks, or what is your primary method for making that initial contact?
LinkedIn seems to be the most common tool used by recruiters, but I find it's attending events like this as well. That's
Yeah.
also why I'm so heavily involved in the networks. So that's why I'm such a strong advocate and supporter of people attending networking events, getting out there and being present and part of these different associations and clubs and events, because that is so much more important and such a better way to truly build a relationship versus just being connected to someone on LinkedIn.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's definitely a warm handoff when you get a message from someone on LinkedIn when they say, hey, I actually came to the Goldmine Project event. I saw you there. It's much better than just saying, hey, here's my resume. It's definitely a lot more of a warm handoff for sure. And then Martin, how does IKEA do it? Tell us what your recruitment process looks like.
Yeah, so we actually went through a little bit of a change in the recruitment process about a couple of years back now. It used to be every store and every location would kind of look after their recruitment on their own, and now we've migrated over to a centralized recruitment team. So and there's benefits to that, but there's also some drawbacks to it as well. With a centralized team, they become more kind of the subject matter experts in a lot of respect. But where we see a bit of the drawback is sometimes there's a bit of a disconnect. And what I mean by that is each location, and I'm speaking, of course, on behalf of IKEA, but I think it goes for a lot of other companies, a lot of other industries as well. But each location has kind of its own unique identity as well. So sometimes that gets a little bit lost in the shuffle when we go to a centralized recruitment team. But outside of that, it's a process that's worked fairly well for us. And having a centralized recruitment team allows them to use their networks a little bit better that they've already established. And that can kind of go beyond the boundaries of kind of the unit here in Calgary, let's say, for example. So then once they put out a job posting, and typically we rely very heavily on LinkedIn and Indeed. Those are two of the platforms that we use the most, aside from, of course, our website. But generally how the process would look is that they would put out a posting, they would filter out through the resumes and what have you, create a short list of candidates. And the first step would be to have a candidate meet with the centralized recruitment's recruiter assigned to that specific posting. Once that process gets through, then what would happen is an either shorter list of candidates is compiled, and then that gets pushed to the store, where we can now say, okay, here are our top 3 to 5 candidates, let's say. We set up, I'd say, in-person interviews. It's very dependent. A lot of the times we do it virtually, but sometimes we have brought people in as well to have interviews. COVID's just complicated everything, of course. But that's generally kind of how the process looks at a very high level and a very high summary for it.
Yeah. And start to finish, how long would you say from application to offer letter? How long abouts does that typically take? I know there's atypical situations, of course, but what does that kind of look like?
Yeah. And I'll give you the famous HR answer of it depends.
Yeah.
It really does depend on a lot of factors, right? And mostly it's dependent on what type of position we're looking at. Looking at kind of an entry-level position, generally speaking, those can move fairly quickly. Once they've met with the frontline leader, the frontline leader has the ability to make the call whether to proceed with the hire or not. They work with centralized recruitment, get the offer going, and that process can take 1 to 2 weeks and move really quickly. As you progress and move up, and as we recruit for more specialized positions, for example, recruiting an accountant, it becomes a little bit more complicated, because then a lot of the other business partners have to be involved, or I shouldn't say have to be involved, but want to be involved in the process. If I need to work hand in hand with this potential candidate, I want to have an idea of how they're going to gel with me. So it's not necessarily just to the hiring manager. There's a few other parties that would be involved. So again, it depends.
Yeah, no, I knew that was going to be the answer.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And Guillermo, how do you do it? How do you recruit your folks?
Okay. Again, as both of my colleagues mentioned, it's highly dependent on the nature of the role. I will first speak for generally, like how Enbridge does it. For just about any role, usually a posting obviously goes up, and a recruiter is assigned to the client group that is associated to that posting, to that position. And the recruiter will, as the applications start to come in, and once the postings are up, they are kind of duplicated on LinkedIn and also on Indeed and a few other job search engines. As the applications start to come into the applicant tracking system, the recruiter will be the first filter, if you will. Like, they will conduct a resume review, an initial resume review, looking for certain keywords, for certain skills, for certain sets of experience based on the intake interview that they previously had with the hiring manager. And then based on that, the recruiter will put together what I refer to as a long list, which is your first short list, but I call it a long list because it's longer than the next one. So that long list will have usually around 10, 12 candidates that I will point out basically to the hiring manager and ask them to help me review, and then further shortlist to a list of 3 to 5 that potentially would be put through the interview process. As of late, we have adopted a tool called HireView, which helps us to do what do you call it? Video pre-screenings, if you will, which, it's a double-edged sword because, it actually provides a lot of advantages as it also has a couple of cons, right? But I have to say that I think it works. It has the pros outweigh the cons, definitely, because people receive a set of questions that will help, to better assess how good a fit they are for the role. And those questions are, something that they don't have to answer the questions right there and then, when a recruiter calls you to pre-screen you, and you have to come up with an answer right there and then, right? You can actually answer the questions, over a 48-hour period, find the best time for you to be able to sit down, focus, concentrate, eliminate any disruptions or distractions that you may have. Most people do it at night after everybody's gone to sleep. And then it's great for the recruiter as well, because I turn on my computer in the morning, and then I see that there's already quite a few of the pre-screens completed. And then I get to see it, the hiring manager gets to see it, and we get to assess a little bit better, each question that is asked. As you can imagine, then this further shortlisting translates into a set of interviews, and for most roles at Enbridge, the process is usually 1 or 2 interviews. I specifically work in the technology and innovation lab, and our processes are quite a bit different from the rest of the organization. And in our case, what we try and do is we actually schedule 4 interviews per person, but they're all short interviews that ideally we can have completed in the same morning. because our mission is to be able to make a decision that same day and be able to provide feedback that same by the end of that day to the candidates that interviewed for our roles. In the 4 interviews that take place, they each assess a different thing. One of them is called the leadership interview, which is conducted by one of the leaders, and they assess more of a leadership type questions, and not necessarily for leadership type roles, but like everybody needs to lead themselves somehow as well, right? So questions that have to do with mindset. How do you make decisions? How does your thought process work? Those kinds of questions go into that kind of an interview. It takes 30 minutes, so it's fairly short. We have a cultural fit interview as well, also 30 minutes. That one is conducted by one of the team members. Then we have a domain interview, 30 minutes as well, and it is designed to try and assess how well the candidate understands the whole domain of software development, not just the role or the technical skills that they personally may or may not have, but how they understand, agile, which is like the mindset, the culture, the methodology that covers pretty much everything that is done in an agile environment, a software development agile environment. And the last interview is the craft. The craft interview is a little bit longer, 45 minutes to an hour, and that one is designed to assess technical skills. Ideally, we try and have an offer out like within 24 hours.
Yeah, that's impressive. That's very impressive way to set up your interview process. I think that's one that the candidates probably appreciate as well.
They do. They really do. And, like now with COVID, it's we've had to adapt a little bit, right? But yeah, I have to say that they really expressed themselves very positively about the experience, about the candidate experience, how they thought, it was great. You have the 4 interviews one morning, they get to tour the lab a little bit and get to see how things work and everything. And then by the end of the day, they have either an offer or feedback.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think we can all speak to going through, an interview process, and sometimes it can be long. Sometimes you don't get feedback. And I'm sure that that's very much appreciated, especially as we all know, a lot of folks have been employed for long periods of time, and it can be kind of a kick in the shin when you don't hear anything back. Right. So that's a really great setup. So my next question for you all, and I'll just kind of throw it out there, is, I'm sure between all of us here, we've seen well over a couple thousand resumes. What would you say, just generally speaking, for these industries that we're chatting about here today, what for you are some of the do's and don'ts that you would really recommend that people either go home and change their resume, or they remove from their resume today? What would you suggest?
One suggestion. Oh, sorry, Sean, please
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. No, I was just going to say, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to tailor, to make sure that your resume speaks to the job description, to the job that you're applying to. I think it's very important. I mean, we all like to think that we have a generic resume that can portray us in the best of ways to any job, but I don't think that if you don't take the time to make an effort to highlight the things that are most relevant to that particular job, I think that you are definitely not taking advantage fully of an opportunity.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I agree. There's nothing worse than seeing a resume with 30 years of experience and trying to read all 5 pages. Anything else that you gentlemen would like to add?
Yeah, I like to kind of jump on that comment because I agree with Guillermo's reflection on that. Oftentimes recruiters or HR, we can tell the candidates that are simply applying for every job that's out there. And they see an opening and they throw their resume there. And, you know, some things will be relevant, but most won't. And I know it takes time, and I know it takes, you know, a little bit more of a investment from the candidate, but to really look and make sure that every item in their resume is reflective of what's required in the job description and the posting, I think is really critical. For the most part, you should be 90% there just on your basic resume, but always making sure that you have every point addressed that's listed in the job description or the job posting, that your resume supports those points, is really worth the effort that it takes to do that when you're putting forward an application.
For sure.
I'll try to add a couple different points to it. I would suggest people remember that your resume is not where you tell the employer everything you can do related to that job. Your resume is a tool to get you an interview. Your resume is there to get you in front of that person, so then you can talk to them about your experiences. So remember that. The other things that I suggest are, it's a very competitive market. And if your resume does not make you stand out, then good luck. So you're better to spend time highlighting things that make you special. Talk about the things that you have accomplished. Highlight the things that, you know, the accolades you've received, like what makes you great. And, you know, I've been talking to people for a while. There used to be a format that people used where they had an objective at the top. I think objectives are garbage. Objectives are generic statements that state the obvious. Yeah. I'm looking for a great opportunity to work for an exciting company and blah, blah, blah. And isn't that why you just applied to this company? Like, let's, you know, so get that out of there and instead use that space to make some bullet point statements about awards you've won, conferences you've attended, things like that, right? So again, make yourself stand out and really ensure that it's, you know, custom tailored. It's okay to have 4 or 5 different resumes on the go, depending on the types of roles you're applying to. One other piece, and then I'll shut up, is use spell check. Use spell check, use grammar check, because it's shocking the number of resumes that I get and there's blatant errors in it. And I think to myself, if you don't care enough to make sure it's correct, or you don't care enough to get my name right in the email, then I can't care enough to put you in front of my client, because I don't know if you're going to be, you know, I don't know if you're going to be accurate there either. So.
Agreed. And there's lots of great services out there if you are looking to have your resume looked at by someone who looks at resumes all day long. So whether it's WCG, Manpower, we've got some folks attending today that are from both those groups. So definitely, you know, go onto their website, see how you can potentially, you know, be able to get in there and have someone look at your resume. You know, having your lovely mom look at your resume doesn't always cut the, it's not always going to get you the results that you're hoping to see in something so important as your career search. You should invest some time and effort into that.
Sure. You know, Catherine, further to that point, I mean, for those people that don't have that network to really share their resume with professionals to kind of review it, you know, you joked about having your mother review it and stuff, and I get the punchline there, but at some point, sometimes after seeing a document 1,000 times over, you can't see the mistakes anymore. And if you don't see the little red squiggle line under spell check, it may be picking up you're trying to say one word, it's spelled correctly for another word. So you bypass that, you miss that. Have some other eyes on it at a minimum. I agree. If you can get a professional look at it, that's certainly the way to go. But anybody to take a look at it and read it word for word to say, does this make sense? Am I using the correct words? And has my, you know, is the grammar correct in what I'm trying to portray here? Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. And one of my other questions kind of in relation to the resume is a LinkedIn profile. How often do you find that you're utilizing LinkedIn in the recruitment process, and what would you recommend for, what are you looking for when you pull up someone's LinkedIn profile, if they have one?
In my case, I want to make sure that it is consistent, that you know, they're basically telling the same story. I also, yeah, usually it happens that I get to see, you know, I leverage LinkedIn more when I am actually direct sourcing for a role. So the LinkedIn profile is the first thing that I see, as opposed to the resume. So definitely I would recommend for people to treat their LinkedIn profile much like they do their resume, and you know, like for each work experience, to not just list the title and from when to when. I think it definitely adds value to be a little bit more specific and say exactly what it is that you're doing there. Because when us recruiters, we're doing our searches, we, you know, we rely a lot on keyword search, on Boolean searches, and you know, if those skills are not listed, or if those experiences are not listed because you only put your title in there, then you might get passed up for an opportunity that could have been a great opportunity for you.
For sure.
Yeah, just to jump on that point as well, it's remarkable how many times a resume and a LinkedIn profile don't jive together. And you can see that the resume was maybe drafted a few years back and their LinkedIn profile is updated, but doesn't reflect the change, or vice versa. One of them has been updated and the other is kind of the forgotten about. And as recruiters and HR folks, I mean, we're looking at those things, right? Like if we get a resume, then we go online and we say, okay, what does their LinkedIn profile look like? And is it completed? Is it matching? Is it the same person, or is it look like completely different folks? So yeah, I mean, it's investing a little bit of time just to make sure that everything is matching up accordingly, because it's really staggering how many times you'll see the you know, varying degrees of difference, but sometimes quite a lot of difference between the two.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Catherine, I just wanted
one I'd add to that is have a profile picture.
Yeah.
Because I tell people it's no different than getting a phone call from a blocked number. How willing are you to accept it? Because you don't know who it is. And when I get a connection from someone on LinkedIn and they don't have a profile picture, I don't know who it is. And in some cases, I'm you know, less likely to maybe connect. So it's a simple thing to do. You take a picture of yourself with your cell phone by wearing a you know, a professional outfit, but basically it's a headshot. Because the other thing it does for you is it provides the opportunity to have recognition with someone. I've used it a number of times, and even in an event like this, I might see someone in the audience and think to myself, I recognize them. I'm connected with them on LinkedIn. I've seen them. So again, it gives you that recognition. So absolutely ensure you have a profile pic on your LinkedIn page.
Agreed. And if everyone doesn't start turning on their cameras, you may not get a response from
I'm
Sean.
glad you said it. I was going to say it because I'm talking to a bunch of black screens right now even. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah,
Catherine,
no,
sorry, I would just like to point out, like, there's a couple of questions there in the chat. I would like to address one of them at this point. You know, like it says, with your experience, how much importance is given to a cover letter? You know, for the roles that I recruit for are usually technical roles, so a cover letter is not expected, but if a cover letter is included, I definitely will read it. I definitely am interested in kind of trying to see a little bit about who this person is, you know, the psyche behind the skills, right? So that's important for me. And in another question said something about internships. When I am going through applications for a co-op position or an internship position, you know, obviously we are not looking for experience because, usually these are people that are, they're schooling and they don't have the experience, right? So at that time, a cover letter becomes even more important, I would say, because that's where they have a chance to sort of uh, show the connection that there may be between a summer job that they held at some point, or an activity that they did at some point, and what they are looking to do, going forward as they develop their career. So I think it's definitely, if it doesn't add value in some occasions, it does in most, but it certainly doesn't take away value.
For sure, especially when it's done correctly, right? As we've kind of pointed out, correct grammar, specific to the job posting. I think it goes a long way as well when you can address maybe the person who you're submitting it to. It's the World Wide Web has made it very easy to figure out who this person you could potentially be submitting your application to, whether you go on LinkedIn and search up who works where, and you can quite easily look at their HR department and see that, oh, maybe I can add that little touch. Again, it may not go to that person, but it definitely shows that you spent the time to research the company. So yeah, I guess further to that, did we want to add any, Sean, Martin, did you want to add anything else to the cover letters piece?
Real quick, Catherine, I would suggest if an application calls for a cover letter, prepare a cover letter, but save it and send it as a separate document. Very often I see people where they will PDF a cover letter and a resume together. And that's not a very good practice, because in a lot of cases, companies are using automated systems now that pull all that information together, and it can really mess things up. So if an application calls for it, send it as a separate document and title it cover letter and title it resume, right? Your resume title of, JJ43 2021 doc. Like, again, that's not going to be seen as real positive on the other side. So, take the 2 minutes to do those things.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that assessment as well. They are asking for separate documents, so separate the two of them. Don't include them all as one long run-on document. Separate the two, because a lot of times, sometimes they're viewing them at different stages within the recruitment process as well. Once you kind of get through a few, the few of the intake interviews, that cover letter isn't really being supported anymore. Most people are gravitating to the resume, right? So when you're meeting with kind of those last few folks in the interview process, they're looking at the resume. They don't want to have to filter through some of the other pieces as well. So having that separated, absolutely critical point. Good observation there, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. All right, and then another question, which I'm not sure how much we can definitely get into here, but one of my questions is, how important are you finding, for whether in recruitment, how important are you finding that educational background in comparison to experience when you're recruiting?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, how heavily are you taking into account education over experience? So if someone doesn't happen to have a bachelor degree, are they still potentially considered? Not necessarily. I know in IT, you've got to have quite a few different, certifications under your belt. What does that look like?
I think that if you don't have the experience, then definitely the education is very important. It's ideal to see it there, as it's probably the only thing that will somewhat keep you in the race, right? There are certain roles for which we always look for certifications, but there is also a bunch of other roles where not necessarily, like software developers, for example. Well, it's great to see certifications. They're not always necessary. These days you can become quite a proficient coder, programmer by without having to get a certification. So it's not a must, but some roles do call, especially do call for it, like a business analyst or a scrum master or something like that. We definitely want to see a certification in those cases.
Yeah, I would echo that statement as well. It really, and again, here's that banner of it depends. Depends on the role of what you're hiring for. I think is critical, right? And again, I'll use the example of an accountant. If we're bringing someone into our finance team or our accounting team, we're going to want someone that has that background in that desired field. I think kind of backpedaling a little bit, though, it really is on the employer when they're putting out a posting. It should be very clear and specified what we're looking for. So if we're looking for someone with a major in XYZ or a bachelor's degree in ABC, it should be mentioned there that this is a must versus this is a nice to have. So that is the first part, right? I think there's an onus on the employer to kind of make sure that that is clear. But understanding that sometimes a posting will just go up and it may say that this is an absolute must have. I look at it, and if I'm a candidate and I meet all the qualifications with the exception of the educational piece, throw your hat in the ring. Really, the worst that can happen is you don't move forward. So I would always suggest people do that, because sometimes, as much as employers require candidates to be very exact on their postings, sometimes employers are not as, we don't practice what we preach. And I've seen some postings go where you kind of look and say, we really didn't need to put that as a mandatory field. So because of that, if you meet the qualifications and you meet the basic qualifiers for it, throw your hat in the ring. Absolutely.
I agree with Martin. I think that, in the 10 years I've been recruiting, the number of companies that I've worked with that say it's mandatory to have a degree, but I put a candidate forward that doesn't have a degree that they fall in love with, it happens. Again, it's dependent on the organization. It's dependent on the level of the role. I'm often asked by people, do I need an MBA? Well, do you need an MBA to be a supply chain analyst? No. Do you need to be an MBA to be a COO? Yep, probably. So it's dependent on where you want to go. The other thing I would suggest to people is looking at professional designations and certifications. That's the other piece too. I just saw a question come in from Gary about online learning. Absolutely. It's possible now to do your green belt, yellow belt certification through online training. So things like that are very relevant. CIFA, Canadian Institute for Freight Forwarding Association, online. ASCM, online. Supply Chain Canada Alberta Institute, you can do your SCMP designation online. And I think that there are things there that are more relevant in supply chain than even a degree or diploma. It's changed a lot because now the colleges and universities are teaching courses in supply chain management where they never used to. There's a lot of people that are engineers that have transitioned into supply chain and gone back and gotten their CSCP or CPIM designation to give them the credentials in education. And I think companies respect that even greater than a diploma in business. I did a diploma in business, and I don't know what the hell organizational behavior would help me when I worked in supply chain or, consumer behavior. That stuff didn't matter in supply chain. So again, I think professional designations that focus courses and learning on that space are far better.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think the last 18 months has really shown that this is kind of a rebirth for a lot of people in their careers. And a lot of folks have been unemployed for the last 18 months. And in a lot of ways, it's leveled the playing field. So when you're throwing your resume out there and you don't have a job, it's not looked at like it used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even. That's something that everybody goes, oh yeah, COVID. So, but it's a whole different point to then say, oh, I haven't been working the last 18 months and I didn't do any upgrading. I think that's a very different statement. And I think that, For myself, I look at resumes all day as well. I work for Olympia Trust Company, and yeah, you can definitely spot the folks who aren't driven and passionate and looking to find their next role, right? So no, really, really great point, Sean.
Yeah.
Catherine, I need to excuse myself for a couple of minutes, if I may. I will be right back.
We'll
Thanks.
see you back. All right.
Yeah, and Catherine, just on that, I think you nailed it. If someone has been off work for 6 months, 12 months, whatever the case may be, I think there's a general understanding of why the circumstances may present themselves that way. And employers are not looking down on those folks like they may have in the past. But with that said, they are looking to say, okay, so what have you been doing during that time? And it's like, I'll revert it to athletics, right? If you're cut from a team and you're looking for that next team to sign with, you have to go through the workout routines. You have to keep your body in shape. And it's the same thing for employment. If you're sitting there for 6 months, however long, and you haven't been exercising your brain, you haven't been plugged into, even reading articles that are on LinkedIn or out there and keeping informed of the trends that are going on, that is going to reflect. And like your brain is like any other muscle in your body. You have to keep it exercised, you have to keep moving, and you have to keep it trained in a specific way. So, for those people that have been struggling to find that next job, make sure you're still plugging into what current events are going on, what are the trends, what's happening in the economy. And if you have the ability to log in, and there's a lot of free ones as well where you can get courses and stuff. I mean, here's a prime example where we are right now, right? Free session and learn yourself up on a few things, right? Those are really important, and those are very critical. And employers are going to ask too, right? Like, what have you been doing for the last 6 months, right?
Yeah, for sure. And one of my questions as well in relation to this topic is, a lot of our folks who are attending here today are mature workers, are looking to transition into a different field. Generally speaking, what would you suggest that are some roles that, or maybe looking at those expectations about what is available at that point in time? Again, very general, odd question, but what would you kind of suggest when it comes to making that career transition later in life?
I think it depends on, not so much what areas are popular or what areas are growing. I think it's more dependent on what skills and experience do you have that you can leverage to break into that area. If you have people leadership experience and supervisory management experience, then that's going to be a big part of it. If it's analytics or finance, if it's, business process, again, those things are absolutely going to make a difference in how you're able to transition your previous experience into something like that. And it's very common for people to do it. So if you worked in food manufacturing, then I would think trying to find ways to work in supply chain where your knowledge of food handling or food processing is going to be critical and help you move in. You've got to use something, because to jump into something that's absolutely different, that's always going to be harder than anything, right?
For sure.
Yeah, and what I'd further add to Sean's comment is I think you have to tailor your expectations sometimes, right? So if you've gone in 20 years into a specific field, more than likely you've kind of advanced and you've taken progression and some steps up. If you're going to all of a sudden take a right turn and do something completely different, to have the expectation that you're going to jump completely laterally in terms of the responsibilities and salaries, all that stuff, it can happen, but it's probably unlikely, right? So you have to be able to understand and accept that and say, okay, where can I get my foot in the door at least to advance my career in a field that I want to explore differently than I have in the past.
For sure. Yeah, and I think I've seen that a lot. Maybe we'll talk about what's going on right now in recruitment and hiring. And I think something that's very unique happening in Alberta is our inflation rates and the fact that everything costs more. For myself, for posting a role as an administrator, we're having folks who are applying looking for 70K annually. And that's just frankly not going to happen, especially if you're looking to join the company. If you're looking to join the company and work your way into that, that makes a lot of sense. But maybe let's just talk about, what's going on in hiring recruitment. What are some of the trends that we're seeing right now with employers?
One of the pieces that I'm seeing, especially since COVID, is the spaces relevant to inventory, materials management, logistics, warehousing have absolutely been blowing up because it's so much more complicated right now. The procurement piece, companies are struggling to purchase things because they're just not available. So it's all those other groups, but then beyond that, it's what do we do with them? People chasing and expediting vendors, figuring out where to store stuff. I've heard of companies, it wasn't that long ago that in Calgary, it was tough to find warehouse space. There was nothing available because some companies were sitting on inventory because of shutdowns. Others were hoarding and others were scrambling to try and find stuff. So COVID has actually created a lot of opportunity there. And I think the energy sector starting to show some signs of rebounding. Drill rig counts are up. And I'm hearing that companies that produce and sell drilling fluids are all going gangbusters right now. So again, I think there's going to be a return there, which is going to create a vacuum because there's going to be a lot of people that left that sector to move into other areas that are going to go back. And I think that's going to create a lot more opportunity in Alberta.
And Guillermo, I see that you returned back. The question is, what are we right now seeing in hiring trends right now in these industries and what's going on?
Okay, well, the technology sector, guys, is very hot right now. I'm sure that you've seen the news. Actually, Calgary is positioning itself very well in the tech space. I'd say that we are starting to be looked at as a technology hub, and that is only going to attract more investment and more companies to set up shop here, and we are nowhere near the able to meet the demand that this will have in the technology sector for technical skills in the software development space. And one thing that I'd like to point out is usually when I talk about the software development space, people always imagine or think of only developer jobs like coding, right? But a software development operation is so much more than that, and there are all sorts of positions. There's the business analysts. There are the guys, the people, sorry, that talk to the users and try to understand what the users' challenges are in the way that things are being done today, in order to understand what the requirements could be for a potential solution to be developed. So they translate the user's needs into technical requirements. There's a lot of transferable skills that can go into a position like that, as you can imagine. There are technical writers, there are product owners. Product owners is usually someone that is on the side of the business, and they are like the main client, if you will. They are the ones that will try and ensure that whatever the development teams are building or working on is what they actually need, is what they actually is what they're actually paying for, basically, right? And then within the development teams themselves, there are data engineers, there are quality assurance analysts that do testing. There are people that, Scrum Masters, which is like project managers of sorts. So there's a lot of positions within a software development environment that are not necessarily software developer itself, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I would suggest to anyone to, to take the time to try and understand what a software development operation looks like, or talk to someone like me. I mean, I'm always open to talking to people that want to learn a little bit about this but this space, right? And what it takes to get into it, and what opportunities may lie and may be available.
Hey, Martin, I'm going to jump in real quick on what Guillermo just said, because I think he nailed it again. Is also remember, with all these software developer roles or all these tech roles coming to Calgary, there's going to have to be more computers, which means there will be people to fix computers. There will be warehouses full of monitors and cable and all the hardware that goes along with it. So you have to look at all the spin-off that comes with that, right? Construction will boom when these buildings are coming in. So there are supply chain roles dealing with physical goods that are used in all these service sectors, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to kind of further add on to that, there certainly has been a difference that we've seen in the last 12 months, 8 months, where we put out a posting and we would get a pile of applicants. And we'd filter through them, and we could really even take our time with applicants and kind of, hire without having, the built-in speed that we need to get people into the seats. And now we're finding that but even before we're putting an offer letter out, some folks are saying, oh, I've got another offer somewhere else, I'm out. It is changed dramatically. Whereas at the beginning of COVID, we had a lot of people that were losing their jobs and getting laid off. We're starting to see now a shuffle of the deck. That group now has options, and they're exploring different industries. They're exploring different roles. It certainly has changed from where it was, I'd say, even 6 months ago. It is certainly, things are picking up. We are seeing it as employers. The job market is getting very, very hot, despite the fact that we're still kind of in this pandemic. Things are opening back up, and the job market is certainly reflecting that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely seems to be the theme of what's going on right now, is that it's, for a lot of employers, we put out job postings and we're seeing significantly less applicants. So don't be one of those folks when weeding yourself out. Don't ever do that. Throw your hat in the ring, like Martin said earlier. There's nothing worse than taking away that own potential. So yeah, no, definitely some great points here, gentlemen. And I think we'll wrap up my portion here of asking some questions. Let's hand it over to the audience here. And what we'll do is Robbie's going to be facilitating some questions from the chat function here. So if you haven't asked a question already, feel free to add in some more comments here as we wrap up our last half an hour. Robbie, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine. I just first want to say, Guillermo, Martin, Sean, I do appreciate all of the information you guys have provided, not just me, but everybody who has been watching this webinar. And to start off, I know that a couple of these questions have been tackled already, but there are some that I do want to get to you. First, how do you get your resume past the system filter that look for keywords? Anybody have any good answers? Go right ahead.
Hope you got it right. That's a really tricky one. But I think it was said earlier by one of my panelist colleagues that you should be kind of mirroring some of the language in the posting in your resume. That's one of the easiest ways to do it, is if they say that you have to know how to paint walls purple, well, make sure that somewhere you say that you've painted walls purple. Because again, those are the things that ATS, that automated tracking system, is picking up on, and it's going to pull in.
All right. Anybody else have anything else to add? That was a really good point, though. I don't think there's much to
Yeah,
that.
no.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree with that statement. I mean, the algorithms are built in the background, and you know a lot of employers kind of rely on those. And so, in order, you can either try to beat the system or join the system. And I think in this instance, you want to really take a look at what's included in that posting and making sure that your resume and or cover letter have some of those words that are reflected in there, so that they do pick up based on that algorithm.
All right, awesome. I guess the next question I have is with COVID and everything that it is affected, the most basic thing it's been affecting is personal communication, as we've seen with this webinar existing online. So when it comes time to meeting with someone for personal or informational meetings, how would you set those up in today's climate?
If I may, in our case, we are definitely leveraging Microsoft Teams. So everything is pretty much being done remotely via a platform very much like this one.
All right, Sean, Martin, anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I think having the ability to connect virtually, I think, is critical right now, because that's usually 9 times out of 10 is kind of the first step in the process, is that someone wants to connect with you. And you know, sometimes it's by phone, but a lot of the times it is virtually through a screen as well. So having a device or having the ability to make that connection virtually, I think, is important. I still think there's a place, and I still think there's an importance to having face-to-face and personal discussions and interviews. But there certainly has been a growing trend to connect virtually. And again, to Catherine's point when she kicked this off, this would normally be a session that was done live, and now we're sitting here looking and talking through a computer screen, right? So there is that transition, but just having the tools available to participate in these things, I think, is critical.
The other thing that I would add to it is respect the time of the individual you're reaching out to. I get emails constantly or LinkedIn messages asking me if I can meet for a coffee. If I did that, I would never get my job done. So it's one of those things where start with a phone call, ask for a telephone call, ask for, if I can do that from my desk and spend 5 minutes with you, opposed to stopping what I'm doing, opening Zoom, meeting with you, earn the right to have the further conversations with people as well. Because again, people's time is important. And if someone does say they're going to, ask them for their availability. Remember, they're doing you a favor in a lot of cases by talking to you. I see this very often with students that are trying to do the networking because they have such very tight schedules with classes. And the message they'll send to an industry professional or somebody that's in the company they want to work for is, here's my schedule. And it's kind of almost perceived as being pushy, as, well, my schedule is more important than yours. So here's my schedule, what you work around that, right? I would say, you know, if that person agrees that they're going to talk to you or have chat with you, just ask them, let me know your availability, right?
So that's a really great point. You got to make sure that you abide by their schedule, because as you've said, it's them taking time out of their days to facilitate whatever kind of information you need. And the next question I have in the chat is, how can a candidate make a good impression when networking with a recruiter, and how they can network successfully with key decision makers in the supply chain industry?
People are inherently good and want to help. Be honest, be sincere. I will absolutely go out of my way to help introduce people to other individuals or professionals or companies, even if I'm not doing business with them, or if I don't have a search with them. I will all the time help people with that. If I see someone is sincere, all the people that are here today have already invested time in themselves. There was 80 people that registered, but nowhere near that number that actually attended. So I see people that have gone out of their way here today to do things. Activity breeds activity. And, you know, being that person is always a way that we're going to help.
That's great. It's great that you want to give back And speaking on that, when we're talking about how to make a good first impression, and I can extend this to Martin or Guillermo if you guys have anything to say on this, but when going back to my previous point of how COVID has kind of shifted the focus on how both applications are being seen and how clients are being taken in, how are online courses seen in terms of making up for the lack of formal education and work experience?
In the IT world, it's becoming, very, very normal. Like, these days, to tell you the truth, we don't stop to take a look to whether the course that you took was virtual or in person. It's there's a lot of very, very well recognized and reputable outfits out there that provide virtual education, like a Udemy and the likes. There's all sorts, and yeah, no, we do recognize those and credit those definitely.
Yeah, I think just to further add to that, I think generationally, there may be that kind of tail end of folks that still want the in-class experience and stuff. I think those people are slowly kind of falling off on the other end of retirement stuff now. Online is to me very well recognized. I don't think that the majority of employers would look and frown on someone who took got accredited online versus someone who sat in a classroom environment. There may still be those folks around, but it is certainly a dying breed. I think everyone is recognizing the efforts that are still being made, whether you do it through a screen or a classroom, as long as you are gaining that knowledge. I think that's the main point.
And going off of that, when like education is seen as the same, whether it's online or in person, when you're considering volunteering, as I am currently volunteering with Kathleen and the Goldmine Project, which I'm very thankful for, but basically, how is that seen in terms of professional development or experience, or I guess my question is, how is volunteer experience seen in comparison to education or real world job experience?
Again, speaking for the IT space, it's definitely just as valuable. What we want to see is, we want to see that you actually did, you actually developed the skill somehow, whether you were getting paid for it or not, especially with, some skills that are rather newly in demand, I would say, and there isn't a lot of them, and there isn't a lot of people with those skills or those that knowledge out there. We do consider people that have only gotten the training. We consider people that only have volunteer experience or like a work experience kind of thing, as much as we also value and consider people that have the actual work experience, right?
I think there's
yeah.
I think there's also a lot of ways that you can volunteer and gain necessary knowledge or experience that's going to be used. I tell people, if you're going to volunteer at the food bank, go in and instead of packing hampers, ask them if you can volunteer to do a physical inventory. Ask them if you could volunteer to help set up a Kanban. Do things that are supply chain related. I know people that worked in dental offices that have gone through and done an inventory reconciliation and done purchase planning for them and set time fences and calculated economic order quantities. So if you've got a friend that owns a company or a family member that works at a business where maybe you could go do those things for them, now you're not only volunteering, but you're volunteering in a way that is actually doing a supply chain job.
Yeah, because it's not about just giving yourself up for volunteering experience. It's about going that step further and trying to figure out what specific volunteer experience can get you a better chance of getting a job.
Yep.
And I know as a graduate of SAIT myself, I can very much sympathize with the next question I got on the list. As a student, I don't have tangible outcomes to show recruiters would it be would it be positively received if I share my college assignments, or would it be more appropriate for LinkedIn? If anybody wants to.
Nobody wants to help you, sorry.
Maybe I'll jump in on that one. I find on LinkedIn, you can go ahead and attach assignments onto your LinkedIn profile, which is very helpful. And a lot of times you can, with your education on your resume piece, go in and add in projects that you've worked on. I wouldn't necessarily spend a large amount of space, but if that is the majority of your experience in that area, definitely build upon that. Like Robbie said, and we're chatting about now, is volunteering. I think so, and Sean's point of saying, hey, just don't, we're here with the Gold Mine Project right now, just don't say, hey, I want to volunteer at the Gold Mine Project. Say, hey, I'm in X and I'm looking to do X, Y, Z. That is a far better application than just saying, I want to help. Tell me how you want to help. Tell me what you're good at. I think those are all very good methods. And I think a lot of folks, again, just don't necessarily volunteer because it necessarily may not be driving them towards their future points. So yeah, volunteering at the food bank is great, but are you actually doing anything that can turn around and help you back too? I think more often than not, Allison was the previous vice president with the Gold Mine Project, and she's joining us here today. And I think from what we've both seen with all of our volunteers that we bring on is often than not, they get employed and then they say, sorry, I don't have time anymore, right? So it definitely, I think, is a really great piece to have on your resume, saying that you're giving back to the community and working in an area that you're passionate about.
To the student that asked that question, I was just joking too. I'm sorry, I was being mean to you. I think there's a ton of opportunity to do it, because I think what people have to remember is, in writing a resume, you don't necessarily want to make it task-based as much as you want to make it knowledge, skills, and ability-based. And as a student, you are managing multiple tasks at the same time. You've got serious time constraints. Your communication skills are through the roof. You're having to write reports. You're having to attend meetings. So there's a ton of things that you're doing that are 100% relevant to certain types of jobs. I do a real quick exercise when I speak to student groups, and I run them through this exercise, and every time it works out really well. And I give the example of, you're working in a restaurant as a server. What are the things you do every day that can relate to working in a job in supply chain? And I get the students to kind of shout out back to me, and all of a sudden they start coming back with all these things. And when you start thinking about solving problems, providing options, completing transactions, delivering orders, entering orders into an order management system, these are all things really that, sure, you're not saying you're delivering a burger to the table, but at the end of the day, it's about what are the base knowledge and skills that you need to perform that task. So there are ways, without lying on a resume, that you can pull the necessary stuff out of any job, any educational experience. You just have to be real and look at it in a deeper way.
I do appreciate that. I just want to tag one little thing onto that, Sean. When concerning actually promoting your education as a form of experience, would you want to call them assignments, or would you rather label them as projects to more give that professional view?
The project is a stronger buzzword in today's market, so I would absolutely use that. Again, try to work the buzzwords in without being blatantly seen as trying to, sustainability as a buzzword today too is incredible. Use it properly, for Pete's sake. But yeah, if you can work those things in, but I definitely think that those are the ways to catch an employer's attention.
Yeah, it definitely helps out the not only just the people who are trying to switch careers, but the people who are graduating from SAIT, because from my year and probably every other student that came from SAIT, they're just as hungry, and they may not have that level of outside school experience. So having that option to just use those experiences is such a great way to show off your skill. And to go along with that, and kind of to wrap up the question section from my side, I have a few more questions. And the first one I want to say is, I know I've had this experience, is when you're wanting to send an application to an employer or a scouter, how much would you say is on the scale of pushing it when it comes to kind of reestablishing that communication and kind of following up? Like, would you say there's a limit to where that is unacceptable, where it might annoy certain people, or would you say that shows your kind of drive to get that opportunity?
There is an absolute balance there. and working on the HR side of things and with recruitment, I've seen it both ways. But I think first and foremost, I think once you've applied for a role and once you have, let's say you've had that first interview, one of your questions should always be, what is the expected timelines and what's the next steps in this process? Just to give you that reference point of where this goes. Because as an employer, we should be very forthcoming, very honest to say, you know what, we've got a lot of candidates to go through. The hiring manager also is on vacation next week. It may be 3 to 4 weeks before we get back to you. You know, that's an unusual circumstance, but it could happen, right? So ask the question of, how long should I be, waiting until I hear back from you? And if it's 1 or 2 weeks, okay, then cool. Then once that time and that clock is expired, I think then that allows you an opportunity to kind of poke the bear a little bit and say, okay, hey, you know what, I had this interview at such and such time. Just wondering if there's any follow-up or any next steps or what have you. I think where it gets a little bit off the rails is if someone says, you know what, you should hear back within the next 2 weeks. And then 2 days later, that candidate is saying, oh, have you made a decision? Or, is there anything that gets back to me? That it's basically kind of, well, we said 2 weeks. We're still working through our process. If we had an answer in that 2 weeks, we'll probably be reaching out to you sooner. So stick to the timelines and pay attention to what the recruiter is telling you in terms of what the expected timeline is. And then once that timeline has expired, if you need to kind of go back and just, again, just kind of say, is there any updates? I think that's more than reasonable. But be understanding of the response that's given. If they say, we're still going down this path, we're still looking at candidates, we'll get back to you. Peace. That's what you need to do.
And if Martin doesn't get back to you, go knock on the door at his office.
Yeah, that's right.
I really love Martin's point, though, because I truly do appreciate your ideology of wanting to poke the bear, but not necessarily wake the bear. You want to make sure that you're still putting in enough effort from your part, but you're not spamming 5 or 10 emails. And yeah, like it's going to help a lot of people just to like back off a little bit. Cause some people, like, as Catherine has said, a lot of people have gotten laid off, which means a lot of people are eager to get back to work. And just to finish up, wrapping up all of these questions, I have one more just to pose to the panel here, but then the last question I can pretty much answer myself. When in terms of resumes and promoting yourself, how important is it to have a reference or to have somebody to talk or to speak on your behalf when it comes to your experience?
Don't list your reference on your resume, because I have seen resumes where the references were actually stronger candidates than the candidate that applied. But it would be unethical of me to call that person and headhunt them. So I've never done that. You don't need to provide a reference until you're asked for a reference. Don't do it. I know that there are companies, and I've heard from lots of people that have had references called before they were ready. It's incredibly unethical for a company to do it. But if you're handing them the number, sometimes they will, and it's wrong. It's very wrong. So I say keep it private. References, as far as I see, I think they're garbage. I've never once in 10 years had somebody give me a reference that spoke poorly about them, because people choose who they're going to use as a reference. It's still a very commonly accepted process. So I think you need to have your references ready, have people that can speak to you, keep in touch with them. Companies are now doing references electronically in some cases, so it doesn't matter if they're from overseas. If a company can reach them via email and have them complete a reference that way, it's being done all the time.
Yep.
That's it for me.
Mhm.
Anything
I,
else?
I would agree.
Go ahead.
I think the emphasis on references, although still there, I think the impact of it is slowly eroding and deteriorating a little bit. You know, your resume and your interview should speak for yourself. And again, to Sean's point, like if I'm going to list 2 or 3 references, I'm cherry picking the people who are going to speak highly of me. And I think that goes without saying. And some companies want to just have that validation. And that's where, you know, having references can still be of value for some folks. But it's usually at the tail end of the interview process. It's usually, we already kind of know who we're going to go with. And if we're going with you, we're just going to check your resumes just kind of as a sober second thought. But very rarely does it make or break someone achieving a role, unless you choose poorly of who your references are.
Yeah, no, I concur with both of my colleagues. I think that definitely you want to have already like references, you know, ready in case that you are asked for them, so that you're not scrambling at the last minute. But you know, the likelihood is that you will not actually be asked for references. But a lot of employers these days are no longer asking for references, and other employers, they are asking for references, and they are being respectful and mindful of the timing. So they actually present an offer, and the offer is conditioned to the reference check, right? So at that point, see, I think that's respectful, because you know the references only will be bothered if an offer is coming, right? And they will not just start calling references and bothering your references for no reason if they have no intention of making an offer. So
And
have
just
them.
one more real quick point to also identify is that if you are listing a reference, give them the heads up that you're applying for a role. Because sometimes you call and you say, oh, who, oh yeah, this person, oh yeah, what role and what company are you from? And you kind of build off of that first. It's not a really good first impression, and it looks a little bit ill prepared. So if you are listing a reference, make sure you connect with them to say, hey, I've thrown my hat in the ring for this. They've asked for my references and I've included your name as a contact.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there. I've definitely seen a couple experiences where some of my classmates will just get calls and they won't be informed. And it would just, let's just say it didn't turn out well for them. But yeah, I appreciate everybody's comments and input on this question. And the last little thing I want to approach before passing it back over to Kathleen is a question in chat in terms of making yourselves visible on social media and whether it's relevant or important. And you all 3 of you can latch on, but all I'm going to say in regards to that is yes, it is very important and it is very relevant to promote yourself, but I will leave it to the rest of our panelists.
I'm a big advocate. You cannot these days, you cannot be in the technology space and not have a LinkedIn profile, for example. I mean, that is, you know, your number one. It's these days, I think it's even more important than the resume itself to have a LinkedIn profile. So I don't know. I'll let my colleagues speak for, you know, for other sectors, but in the technology space, definitely.
All right.
Yeah, no, I would echo those thoughts, and I would also just caution people to take a look at what's on their social media outside of LinkedIn, i.e., Instagram, Facebook, all those things. If it's public and employer has your name and they're checking those references, they're also looking at what profile you're putting forward on those platforms as well. Those, if you're in the public domain, you have to be understanding that someone you're applying with is going to check those out, and you have to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward on those spaces as well.
Oh, definitely. And Sean, do you have anything else to add as a little cherry on top?
I was just going to mirror exactly what both these guys said. And, you know, to Google your name and see what comes up, I think is important because, you know, if the first thing that pops up is your Facebook page and a picture of you doing a beer bong, it's not good. Like, again, it's so simple these days to find information on people that I think it's critical. You know, comments, political comments, religious comments, you know, if it can be found that fast, it has no place in the workplace, and the workplace is everywhere now. So I think those things have to be thought of.
I 100% wholeheartedly agree. Like your image and how you promote yourself online is one of the most important things that you need to be considering when making online applications. It's all about presenting yourself in the best way possible. And I see there's one more question, and I think it would be aimed more towards you, Sean, or either of our other panelists. But is a certification in supply chain a must to obtain a job here in Alberta and Canada? Or give priority, and please advise what is a suitable certificate for contract specialists to obtain in shortest time to increase the chance of obtaining a job? Oh, sorry.
I think it's a must if the application calls for it. So again, it's a case by case situation. There are companies out there that 100% insist on people having formal education or certification, but there are other companies that don't care at all. Which one is most relevant to contract specialists? I would think that probably your designations or certificates through Supply Chain Canada, they're the evolution of what used to be PMAC, the Purchasing Management Association Canada. So it's probably most relevant opposed to the logistics or other associations that are out there.
All right. And right before I pass it off to Catherine, I want to say thank you so much for everyone who has supplied your questions and thoughts in our chat. And I want to send a very special thank you to Sean, Martin, and Guillermo about providing the answers for these questions. And as we gauge into the end of here, I want to pass it back over to my co-host, Catherine. Take it away.
All right, thanks everyone for attending here today. I was able to check with Sean and Martin, and they said for those who have attended today, you're welcome to reach out to them on LinkedIn if you have any questions. I wasn't able to check with Guillermo. Can people reach out to you if they weren't able to ask their question? Yeah.
By all means, yeah, reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. Be happy to chat.
For sure. And yeah, all these fine folks who've joined us today they're all in the recruitment world, the HR world. So they will definitely have some great further insight for any of you who would like to connect with them. We'll wrap things up here and to keep us on track for time's sake, because we've got some very important people who are busy and have to get back to work. So thank you so much for your time once again. We were very, very happy to have you here at the Gold Mine Project, and for those who joined us here today. For those of you who are attending, if you're interested in other Gold Mine Project events, we don't have any posted yet for the new year, but we'll be posting some come the end of December here. So keep your eyes tuned on for that, for more interesting events that we'll be bringing to all of our job seekers here as they transition in their careers. So thank you for coming. We'll post today's event on YouTube here this week. And if you have any further questions, you're also welcome to reach out to myself on LinkedIn for further information. So thank you all for coming.